I joined with my partners Mike and Wes and created KumoMTA so that we could advance email to a whole other level. Take the whole concept of licensed commercial high volume mail and make it open source for the rest of the community that for a lot of different reasons. I'd love to have a conversation with anybody about any of those topics anytime. Let's go the other way. So I mentioned KumoMTA. Let me just briefly explain. KumoMTA is the very first open source MTA that was specifically built for high volume senders. Everybody knows what Postfix is. Probably some of you have that already installed in some of your Linux servers. You've used that in the past. KumoMTA is like that on a billion steroids. It dwarfs Postfix from the sending point of view. We have multiple customers sending 1 billion messages a day. You can also use it with much easier configuration. We've done a lot of work on making it easy to deploy, easy to scale, very large, make large clusters with very easy configurations. And it was built specifically to be able to do cloud scaling. So you didn't just have it on a single server. You can actually deploy in multiple clouds in multiple different places and organize it in one place. And I did talk about the billions per mail. Billion sounds like a lot. I don't know how, anybody in this room send more than 100 million messages a day? Probably not. Our typical world, our typical customer is 1 million messages an hour or higher, but we have a lot of users that send a lot less than that as well. So we have, I personally spend a lot of time with a user that sends about 1,000 messages a day, but they have very complex needs. And that's where KumoMTA can really help out. But when you get into the high volume, that's where it really takes a lot of special skills to get past some of those thresholds. Talk a little bit about how those get higher. But the kind of people that send that very, very large scale, email service providers, obviously, if you're at Klaviyo or Braze, I can guarantee that you're sending billions of messages a day for your users. The individual people that are sending may only be sending 10,000 messages, but they've got 10,000 of those people doing those 10,000 messages. Social networks. You wouldn't think social networks would send a lot of mail. Interesting insider tip. One of the largest senders in the world is a social network that once told me their job was to put email people out of business because they were going to take over everything. Yeah, you were in that conversation. Told me point blank that the whole point of their social network was to get rid of email entirely. Last I checked, they were sending about 10 billion emails a day. Password resets, notifications, alert notifications, daily logs, all those kind of things. So yeah, social networks actually send a lot of mail, a lot more than they want you to think. Online retailers. If you ever bought anything from Amazon, how many emails do you get from Amazon to tell you that the parcel's away? Hey, it's 10 blocks away. Hey, it's almost at your doorstep. Hey, we delivered it. All email. Mailbox providers. Google. Let's talk about the billions and billions of messages that Google and Yahoo and any other mailbox provider handles. They, aside from the inbound, they send outbound for their users, but also notifications to their users about their own mailboxes. So billions and billions and billions of messages is not that unusual. One of the points that I, when I'm giving people the elevator pitch, people will say like, how could anybody possibly send that much mail? I'm a Disney fan. Unfortunately, my wardrobe consists of work t-shirts and Disney t-shirts. If Disney needs to send a notification to all their users to say, hey, the parking lot number B is closed this week, don't use it. Or, hey, there's a sale on tickets. They've got something like 50 million users. None of those users want to wait an hour for that email to hit their mailbox. They want to know right away. So imagine that if you want to send that notification to those 50 million users, you need to send it all in the next 3 or 4 minutes. That's a lot of mail. And that's only one. This is what that looks like, kind of flipped on its head. If you're one of those users that this is 1 billion a month, which works out to about 10 million an hour. Even if you're going to do 1 billion a month, not 1 billion a day, which, by the way, those users are probably 20 in the world. 1 billion a month is much more common. But if you're going to do that, your architecture, the actual systems that send that mail, need to be capable of sending nearly 3,000 messages per second into the system. So this is going to take some complex work, some engineering skill to make those systems actually work. The far end of the scale, you've got startup users, people that are sending 1,000 messages a month, small marketing infrastructure. But like I said, the whole point for anybody is to scale up somewhere in this direction, because that's how everybody in email actually makes money, is by sending more email, right? Not saying you might ever get to this point, or if you are at this point, that's fantastic. You should be on an MTA right now. The likelihood is that you're probably not running your own MTA, that you're down here somewhere in the neighborhood of using a SaaS provider, like SendGrid or Mailgun or some other provider where you're routing your messages through, or you've set up your own smaller MTA like a Postfix or SendMail that you're actually routing messages through directly. What I want to cover for the rest of this kind of falls in this range here. So if you set up, this is a fantastic place for a Mautic server to live. You can set up an open source Linux server of whatever brand you like. You can put open source Mautic on it. You can configure 3 or 4 different open source systems to send the mail, to track it, to pull the logs in, to do your configuration, and you can do all of that on your own at your leisure at virtually no cost. When you start scaling up a little, you have to start thinking, do I want to keep running this myself on my small MTA or directly, or do I move to some other larger service? We would typically recommend, if you're getting to the point where you need to send more mail and you don't want to run your own MTA, you don't want to be your own mail ops person, to go to a SaaS service like SendGrid or Mailgun, something that they can actually manage all the systems for you. You can focus on your marketing, your campaigns, your list management, all the things you need to do, not have to worry about how the underlying stuff actually works. But at some point, you get to the point where your SaaS service is going to start causing you cost pressure. That's a good word for it, cost pressure. And you're going to want to think about, should we actually go back and start looking at going to an MTA? We can't go back here again. We can't go back to what we were doing before because that MTA is too small to handle your needs. Now you've gotten bigger, so that you were using a SaaS provider who could do that all for you. Now you've outgrown your SaaS. Where's that point? Where do you suddenly say, I can't afford my SaaS anymore, or I don't want to be on my SaaS anymore. I want to go to something that I can control myself and start being productive. But how do you do that? Now that you've invested all this time into here, how do you move to that next step? So I want to talk a little bit about how you make those decisions, how you actually go through moving from a SaaS provider to an MTA, and what that MTA should actually look like, so that you can actually get up to this point. I'll stop anytime. If you have any questions, you want to stop me, I'm happy to pick up on a slide and discuss. Don't be afraid to raise a hand and say, hey, stop, I got a question. All right, starting with SaaS. Even if you're just starting from square one, it might actually be easier to sign up for a SaaS service. Most of these companies, I'm going to pick on SendGrid again. There's a few of them. They all are basically the same, frankly. SparkPost, SendGrid, Mailgun. There's a number of them out there that'll do it. They are all basically the same. They all have a $9 or $10 package that you can start with. You can send up to a few thousand messages. You might get to the point where you're sending 1 million messages a day. They all actually do very, very high volume. But you'll see in a chart I have here a little later, as that volume gets higher, it gets astronomically higher. It's not a linear scale. it can actually, at the very beginning, it can be good for you because you may end up paying only $75 a month for a service that'll get you 100,000 messages. That's probably really good. When you start getting higher than that, now you're paying a lot more than you really should for services that you could do yourself or contract out. So there are some really good pros. They're easily available. You go to the website, you sign up, and you're in business. There's not even a documentation for that. It's like, click here, send you put your credit card down, and you're in business. They have IP pools of other people that are actually sending very similar mail to you. So they can put you in a shared pool right away, and you don't have to worry about warming up an IP. You don't even have to. They actually recommend not even getting a dedicated IP. Do it all on their shared IPs so that you can send mail through right away. When you start sending higher volume or you want to manage your deliverability a little better, you can buy a private IP from them, and you can focus on your own closer deliverability. But for the most part, they have pre-built shared IPs that you can use, which is a great benefit. You don't have to worry about warming up your IPs right away. In-house deliverability. They have people on staff that will just make sure the mail goes through. No matter how bad your mail is, they'll make sure it either goes through or you'll get a notification. I worked with technical account managers and deliverability people who will spend most of the day reaching out to customers saying, hey, your mail didn't go through and this is why, right? You have to change it this way. You have to add this. Make sure that you're doing all these things. It's stuff that you don't have on your own, and you can learn a lot from those professional services. They also have in-house mail ops. They stand up the servers for you. They'll look after plumbing all the IPs. They do all the things that you get into the nitty-gritty of actually doing the engineering work. If your focus is the marketing, building the content, creating your list, and making sure your customers are happy, you don't necessarily want to worry about what's going on underneath the hood until you have to worry about it. There's a lot of cons here too. The cost can add up very quickly. If you're sending 100,000 messages, it's not that bad. You start sending 1 million messages, then it's a concern. You start sending 1 million messages a day, that's a really big concern. So you can continue to doing that, continue to sending through them for quite a long time. They won't ever stop you, but there comes a point where you're spending more money on your SaaS service than you could do it by yourself. You also don't have any control. Those deliverability experts that I talked about that are so helpful, they also make it so that you can't control your individual IPs. The way a SaaS has to work is that they have to make it even for everybody. So if they've got 10,000 users, they have to put a rule in place that works for their 10,000 users. They can't work with snowflakes. I used to work at one of these places. I can guarantee you I had that conversation so many times, no snowflakes. Every time I went to an engineer and said, can you please make it do this? No, no snowflakes. It has to work for everybody. So we'll make it not bad enough for all of these people and not good enough for just one person. We'll be in the middle of the road somewhere. If your marketing or your sending needs are such that you need to have some specialized control, there really isn't a lot of help for you at a SaaS service. And that actually brings us into the advanced use cases as well. The portable one, the second bullet, I kind of skipped over that because I want to dive into that a little more carefully in this next section because the portability is super important. If you use a SaaS service, and again, I'm going to pick on SendGrid, sorry SendGrid. When you start using them for sending your mail, they're going to also want you to use them for things like deliverability consulting, storing your lists here, building your campaigns with this content. And before you know it, you're trapped into using their customized content builder and their customized marketing engine and their customized, and you get locked into that vendor. If you decide at some point to move off to another vendor, you got a huge bucket of work to do to get off your old vendor. That also is true if you want to go to your own MTA. So one of the things I'm going to deal with here is how to not get trapped in that trap. On any vendor, and if you're going to go to a SaaS vendor, I'd recommend picking two. Don't just pick one, because that'll force you not to have vendor lock-in. If you go to SendGrid and Mailgun at the same time, there's no way you can use their campaign management with the other sender. And it saves you from a lot of hassle further down, because if you're doing what we all want to do and grow and scale, eventually you'll grow out of these guys and want to have your own MTA that you can manage. You can't do that if you're vendor locked in. So the things to avoid are anything that doesn't allow you to use it just like a standard MTA, right? If you're using their specific custom suppression management, that's a problem because that won't work with the other vendor and it won't work when you move over. We have, my whole job is customer success and doing professional services with KumoMTA. And almost invariably, one of the biggest things we have to do is take them off their old servers. Well, I've got a suppression list system with SendGrid, but they've got 50,000 addresses on there that I can't get off. They won't let me download it. Great, now we have to start from scratch. If you had kept that in a different place in the first place, then it would be super easy to do an integration. Nobody ever thinks about open and click tracking. But if you use their built-in open and click tracking, you can't use it with another vendor because they're different formats, they're different shapes. But if you build your open and click tracking to use the built-in Mautic open and click tracking or build your own somewhere else. But this is general advice for anybody that's building a campaign system. Put your open and click tracking, your suppression system, your list management system, and your content engine in a separate service. Don't use their services. Use them just as a straight through MTA. Reporting is another one. They all have different reporting. KumoMTA gives you a really, really comprehensive reporting feed. Our logs are huge comparatively, but they give you deep detail on exactly why you got that message. If you were in the panel session earlier, I mentioned one thing you should be doing is looking at your logs every day. In fact, you should be looking at them in real time, but no human can actually do that. That's why we created TSA. But if you just take the surface logs from SendGrid or Mailgun, they'll break it down and say, oh, you had this many deliveries, there were this many soft bounces, and there's this many hard bounces. So what does that actually mean? What is a soft bounce? What is a hard bounce? What is the detail behind that? What does that actually really mean? When you actually look at the raw logs, you can see things like one of the examples was that we talked about was a full mailbox, right? Well, that full mailbox means 15 gigs of mail sitting in a mailbox. Who is that? That's not a real human. So because it's a full mailbox at that particular vendor, you can make the interpolation that there's no human there at all. Take them off your list and stop wasting your money, right? But you wouldn't know that if you were just looking at the surface logs that the service provider gives you and says, oh, it's a hard bounce. Okay, great. What does that mean? So if you separate the reporting, sure, look at their logs, but look at the raw logs that you're getting back from that MTA. Look at those carefully because they will tell a really important story, particularly in the transient failures. So for the longest time, and people still do it, people tend to look at the deliveries and the bounces. Those transient failures tell a really, really interesting story in that, yeah, we're going to try again later, or we're going to try this again in 20 minutes or 40 minutes. Even if it's the same message, if you've retried that 17 times, your mail is probably not going to go through. So,
sorry to interrupt that. I mean, that sounds incredibly detailed and complicated. Is there a tool or a way to do that without losing your mind?
Glad you asked.
Okay. But I set you up.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. I didn't pay them at all. So one of the things that we did with KumoMTA, we actually built something called TSA. The traffic shaping automation system, and it will actually watch those logs in real time. And you can configure, the way those rules work. And I wish we could say we were unique, but there's actually TSA-like things in a number of different MTAs. The providers themselves, like if you're using SendGrid or you're using Mailgun, they actually have that kind of tool in behind that helps their deliverability people. But they rarely, if ever, expose that to you as a user. So you don't get to see those rules that they're actually working with. It happens automatically. If you're running your own MTA, and I know KumoMTA the best, but there are other ones out there that do that kind of thing. There's rules that you can set to say, I've seen this message 3 times. So instead of trying it again, obviously I'm not going to get through. Mark it as a bounce and don't ever send it again. With KumoMTA, you can actually do a lot more than that. There's some very specific rules you can do. But yes, there are ways you can do that. If you're just looking at with postfix, you would have to do that as a human and actually just read them. Do it manually. All right. Any other questions on here? Okay. Good. So at some point, let's make that brighter. Good. At some point, you're going to be using your SaaS provider to the point where you start feeling some monetary pressure. Let's say you get to, I had it on a previous slide here. If you get to the million a month range, you're probably looking at about $700 a month. That's probably about the time that you should start thinking about, at some point I'm growing. I should probably think about moving to something that's going to be a little more efficient for me. If you get to the point where you're doing $1 million a day, that's going to be untenable. You're going to have some real pressure to be able to say, your CFO is going to come to you and say, why are we spending all this money when we could be doing it a different way? So you're going to want to be able to think through, what does it cost us to go to another MTA, and all of the costs, not just how much does it cost us to buy that license or install that software. It's the bandwidth costs. It's the cost of a mail ops engineer to actually keep those things running. It's the cost of holding on to and managing IPs and domain names and things like that. There are some larger costs. But when you do decide to move, you need to understand mail ops. It's not a simple thing. It's not just about setting up a server and installing software. There's updates. There's pressure on CPU and RAM and your hard drive space and rotating logs. There's a lot of things you really need to think about. It sounds complicated. It's really not. If you talk to any of the hundreds of mail ops engineers that I know that would love to find extra contracts to handle, they do it in their sleep. They've been doing it for years. They understand what has to be done. They can see problems coming on the horizon, and they can schedule for those things. Once you've figured out how to automate that, it's actually pretty straightforward if you know what you're doing. One of the things to think about when you want to move from your SaaS provider to an on-premise MTA is about your volume. It's not really enough to have a big volume. It's important to be consistent with your volume as well. One thing that ISPs really, really hate is spiky behavior. So if you have 100,000 messages go through Monday, and you don't do anything on Tuesday, and you do another 100,000 on Wednesday, that's not so bad. You do it every second day, that's predictable. If you do 100,000 on Monday and you do nothing until Thursday and then send 1 million messages and then do nothing for 2 weeks, that's a problem, because what the ISP sees is big spikes in your sending. And that looks scary to them. And so they have this big calculation, this reputation calculation that calculates how much you can actually send through their servers at any particular time. And they score that, and they're all different. So Gmail has a different scoring system than Yahoo does, than any of the varieties of Microsoft do. And there's like 3 different calculations there that are very complicated. But the best thing that you can do to get a higher deliverability reputation that'll allow more mail to go through is have consistent mail. So if you're a brand, that's hard, because if you're a brand, you need to make sure that you're sending out roughly the same amount of messaging every single day to keep that line nice and level and no spikies. If you're an ESP, if you're sending mail for other people, then being able to schedule their mail a little bit differently so that you even out that line is super important. Something that that large-scale providers like SendGrid and Mailgun already, they factored into that their mailing. That's why they have IP pools. So an IP pool actually has different messaging from different senders, and that just automatically scales out. It's very, very rare to have one IP send a ton of mail out if you've got a variety of people. It just native. But you as an individual, if you're going to set up your own system to do your own mailing, you have to think about that. How do you actually make that nice and even? It doesn't have to be perfect, but close.
How many IPs do you recommend for on-premise?
That's a great question. In theory, 1. theoretically, you shouldn't need more than one IP. In practice, the rule that I have heard in the past that has worked is one IP per 100,000 messages per hour. And that typically works for most people. That's not a hard written rule though, because it depends on quality. It depends on the feedback that you're getting. It depends on the volume, right? So if you're sending 1 million messages an hour, you should probably have 10 IPs, but I would make sure that you had probably a few more to spread that around on. So how many IPs do you need? It's a question that depends on a lot of other input, but in general, the starting point, I still believe this, and I've heard this for 20 years running from a number of different deliverability people. Bank on one IP for every 100,000 messages per hour that you're sending on average. Don't hold me to that because it's witchcraft at this point, but it seems to be witchcraft that works.
Black Friday is coming up. Christmas is coming up. Big retailer. How on earth am I going to keep that line flat?
Right? Yes. Thank you for BFCM. Yay. Yeah. In the US, this is a Black Friday, Cyber Monday issue, right? How do you do that? Great question. So ramping up ahead of time for several months is really important if you can do that. I work with a number of ESPs that they're coaching their people to do that as well for their pooled IPs. They'll try to get people to ramp up their mail months before in things like newsletters, not necessarily alert notifications, but like notifications of, hey, have you checked your subscription lately? Stuff that isn't really all that important, but it puts traffic through the IPs to slowly build that ramp. You're going to get that spike. They all know that it spikes. All of the major providers totally understand BFCM. Like that whole cycle from really it's about the middle of October now to January 15th worldwide, but mostly in the US, that's a major problem. They all know that it's going to spike. So it's not that big a deal. What you don't want to do is have it spike from 100,000 to 1 million overnight. And your users shouldn't be doing that anyway, right? What they will do is they might double in volume. Each one of them might double in volume. So you've got a fairly large capacity punch. But what you can do is you can coach those people to say, hey, October is here and November is coming quickly. That you might, instead of sending one marketing message a week, you might be sending 2 and then maybe 3 and say, hey, it's getting really, really close. You really should buy those things, right? So you can ramp those up in a logical way that doesn't sound a little crazy. Oh, wow. Didn't realize we were here.
2 minutes.
2 minutes?
And then it's question time. So,
well, no one told me there was going to be questions. So I will go fairly quickly through. This is actually one of the most important slides. This line here is kind of the break point. I did a study on this like a year ago, looking at what it would actually cost to go from your SaaS provider to MTA. Up until about 100,000 messages a month, you're probably okay on your SaaS provider. This orange line, I actually picked a generic target, but it's a mash of SendGrid, SparkHost, and Mailgun. They're all within about $1 of cost-wise. At this point, you can actually afford to install a fully supported KumoMTA instance and hire a MailOps engineer and still be cheaper than paying SendGrid. 100,000 messages a month 100 million messages a month is where that breakpoint is. Above that, you're just burning money. You're just throwing it away. So that's. I think you probably all get a copy of this. If you're happy, you're welcome to read through it and ask me anything you want. So the rest of this is actually, I can skip a lot of this stuff because I've already talked about a lot of it. What do you need to do? You need to architect a solution. Figure out it's not just the MTA. It's about the MTA and the injectors and the logging systems and all the backup systems, everything else that has to go into it. That's what we can do to help you figure out. deploying it, integrating it with all the other things you have, like Mautic and your reading system and all the bits that go together. But from a generic point of view, if you're sending 1 million an hour range, you can get by with a single server, injecting directly out of Mautic into your single server and sending out to your customers. When you get much larger scale, you're going to want to cluster those things, probably have an outbound proxy to protect your IP so that you can rotate those those systems for maintenance. When you get into the very large scale, those customers that I said were in the billion a day or billion a month range, you're going to want to have clusters of things. It gets a little more complicated, but that's what you pay us for. And I had mentioned this earlier. I can't remember if it was actually at lunch or at the panel, but I did a huge study on the types of services. And this is actually in my blogs, our blogs as well. So you can search our blogs for performance, KumoMTA blog performance. You'll find this in the last performance one I did. I compared Intel-based servers with ARM servers and what it actually costs to implement the same service function. You can actually get more value out of a 16-core ARM server than you can out of an 8-core Intel server, and do it at a lower CPM. So I actually calculate, they don't sell it as CPM. I calculated it that way by putting all the factors into it. But this is actually the column that you want to deploy. And I can have a longer conversation with you about which server to pick and how to deploy it. But you can get more cores for a lower price if you do it with ARM and actually get more productivity out of it. Happy to have a longer conversation about that. Everybody probably knows what all those acronyms is. Please, anybody raise your hand if you don't know what any one of those acronyms are. Okay, pick one, I'll tell you. No? Okay. We can have a conversation about that later. Yeah, and that's really about it. The rest of this was talking about working on your integrations with your APIs. You've all worked with Mautic. You know how integrations work. This can take you to one layer deeper than that, being able to integrate with our admin and our logging systems, pulling that information back into a better tool that gives you better control over it through Mautic. And I think that's about it. I think we're at the thank you. If you have any questions at all, we do have a free Discord. In fact, our whole thing is free. We're open source. So you can go to KumoMTA/Discord. You can join our Discord. Feel free to answer questions. There's 800 people in our community Discord. They're happy to answer questions. We're always in the Discord answering questions as well. You join our community. And I think I need to stop talking now and ask questions. Yes. There you go.
Thanks a lot. That's really, really great. Any questions from the room first? Maybe one of the acronyms also.
Good.
Good. Then I will take a look into the online thing. I need to go to the other one because my connection dropped. As always, there was a.
The acronym I get the most questions about is DMARC. Why do we have to do it? Please do it.
No, there was another one actually. No, I think. I need to first get you back there. Yeah. EHLO, I think.
EHLO.
Yeah, it was that one that I didn't know as well.
I want to go back.
Oh,
Are you doing that or something?
Yeah, I can do that. So it's that EHLO. The one.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. That's the SMTP conversation. Hello. That's how you say hello to a server. You literally say hello.
Extended hello.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's yes.
Because it used to be hello, but then they enhanced it to extended hello.
Yes. So 30 years ago it was HELO.
Yeah.
And since extended SMTP existed, it's EHLO. So extended. So to put a finer point on it, if you just say HELO, it basically just says, yeah, fine, send your mail. If you say EHLO, you'll get a whole list of possibilities and say, this is what this server supports. Here's the cryptography you can use and everything else.
It's actually quite fun to read the protocol steps because it's like a conversation. Yeah, it's like talking back and forth like people.
We actually have a client inspector. Trace. We have a client trace and we have a server trace on our system. So I actually quite enjoy watching it.
Yeah.
You set it up and you can actually watch the entire conversation going through. It's horribly
like a chat, like a WhatsApp chat.
It's a conversation. Yeah. That's actually a really interesting point. Is that because SMTP is a conversation. You can be wrong at any point in that conversation. So you can get halfway through it and you just don't end it properly. You forget to put a dot on it.
The definition of agentic AI. Some agents talk to each other in the chat window.
Exactly. Have Siri and Cortana have a discussion. Yeah, cool.
Great. Any other questions? There's none online, so I think we're good. Thanks again for jumping in and covering for Mike. It was a pleasure.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
We are the Mautic community, open hearts and unity. Back to the source where dreams belong. Together loud, together strong. We are the Mautic community, forever proud, eternally. Back to the source, the code lives on. The world's connected. We are one.